At 67 years old, Eleanor Brennan sat on a wooden bench in a Burlington bus shelter at 3 in the morning and counted $8 folded inside her sock. 6 hours earlier, the nephew she had raised since the age of 4 had stood on the porch of her own house. The house she had paid off in 2009, the house where her husband Thomas was buried in the rose bed under the kitchen window, and he had handed her 2 black trash bags, and he had told her, in a voice he did not raise, that she had been a burden the family had carried long enough. Then he turned the deadbolt behind her, and he shut off the porch light. She did not know yet that the power of attorney was forged. She did not know her house had been sold the week before for $186,000 to a holding company in Albany. She did not know that her late husband's wedding ring, still sitting in the small white dish beside the kitchen sink, was now inside a cardboard box she would never see again. But the nephew did not know either. 51 years ago, on the night before he died, Eleanor's father had locked something inside a Vermont train car. And the $8 folded inside her sock was the exact price of the ticket that would open it. This is her story. Before the porch light went out, Eleanor Brennan's life ran on the same quiet clock it had kept for 41 years. She rose at 5:45. She put the kettle on the back left burner of the gas stove, the only burner that lit on the first try since 2011, and she set out 2 cups. One for her, one for Thomas. She had stopped using the second cup in 1998, on the day she came home from the funeral home, but she had not stopped setting it out. The cup was white with a small chip on the handle where Thomas had dropped it on the morning of their 40th anniversary. She kept it on the right side of the saucer because Thomas had been left-handed and had always reached across. She taught 4th grade arithmetic at Edmonds Elementary School in Burlington for 41 years. She retired in May of 2018 with a sheet cake from the teacher's lounge and a card signed by 73 children who had since become electricians and nurses and 1 state senator. 2 of her former students still mailed her Christmas cards. One of them, a man named David Petrosian, sent a fruitcake every December that nobody in the family would eat. Eleanor ate it anyway. She ate 1 slice every Sunday afternoon with her tea until it was gone, because David's mother had died when he was 9, and Eleanor had been the one who taught him long division at the kitchen table after school. She had one specific skill that nobody in her family remembered to mention at Thanksgiving. She could read a document, any document, and know within 3 minutes if the numbers were wrong. 41 years of grading arithmetic had trained her eye the way a piano tuner's ear is trained. She could feel a misplaced decimal the way other people felt a draft from an open window. She had once caught a $5,000 error in the school district's pension statement in 1994. And the assistant superintendent had sent her a handwritten letter of thanks that she kept folded inside her Bible. The house at 412 Maple Avenue was a 2-bedroom Craftsman built in 1928. White siding, a black front door, a rose bed under the kitchen window where Thomas's ashes were buried in 1998, marked by a single flat stone with no name on it, because Eleanor said his name was already in the soil. Her nephew, Marcus Vance, moved back to Burlington in March. He was 43 years old. He had lost a job in Hartford that he did not explain. He had a wife named Lindsay and a father-in-law named Harlan Whitcomb, whom Eleanor had met once at the wedding and had not liked, though she had not been able to say why. Marcus came for Sunday dinners. He brought a bottle of wine each time. He asked Eleanor about her pension paperwork. He asked her about the deed to the house. He asked her twice where she kept her important documents. Eleanor noticed. She noticed the way the questions did not sit inside the conversation. She noticed the way his eyes moved to the hallway cabinet where she kept the manila folder marked property. She noticed that he did not eat her pie crust, though he had loved it as a boy. She dismissed it. She told herself he was tired. She told herself a 43-year-old man who had lost a job in Hartford was allowed to be strange at dinner. On the night before she signed nothing, on the last Tuesday of October, the last night the porch light at 412 Maple Avenue would belong to her, Eleanor stood at the kitchen counter and rolled out pie crust for a Thanksgiving she would never host. She kept her father's silver porter's whistle in the top drawer beside the rolling pin. She had kept it there since 1974. She did not know why. She had never blown it. She did not yet know it was a key. The document arrived on a Thursday morning, the 17th of October, inside a manila envelope with no return address. Eleanor was at the kitchen table when she opened it. The kettle was on the back left burner. The second white cup sat on the right side of the saucer, where it had sat for 27 years. The envelope had been wedged inside her storm door sometime before 6 in the morning, and she had carried it inside with the newspaper and a single piece of junk mail from a roofing company. The letterhead read, Whitcomb, Holloway and Associates, Attorneys at Law, Montpelier, Vermont. She read the document slowly. She read it a second time. She read it a third time with her mother's reading glasses pushed up to the bridge of her nose. The document was a 30-day notice to vacate. It informed her that the property at 412 Maple Avenue had been sold under a valid power of attorney executed by Eleanor Brennan on the 22nd of November, 2024, granting full authority over real property to Marcus Andrew Vance. The buyer was a holding company in Albany. The closing date was the 15th of November, 2025. The sale price was $186,000. Eleanor had never seen a power of attorney in her life. She had not signed anything in November of 2024. She had spent that week in bed with the flu. She set the document on the table. She did not stand up. The kettle began to whistle. She let it whistle for 2 full minutes before she rose and turned it off. Then she drove herself to the Burlington office of an attorney named Francis Bell, whom she had known for 19 years. Francis pulled the power of attorney from the county recorder's office within 3 hours. She placed it on the desk in front of Eleanor and turned it so Eleanor could read it. The signature was not Eleanor's. The loop on the capital E was wrong. Eleanor's E had a small flat foot at the bottom because she had been taught penmanship at a Catholic school in 1962, and that foot had never left her hand. The signature on the document had no foot. The signature had been traced from a Christmas card. Frances filed an emergency motion the same afternoon. She filed a forgery complaint with the Burlington Police Department on Friday morning. She filed a formal objection with the title company in Albany on Friday afternoon. By Monday, all 3 filings had been blocked. The title company had already dispersed the funds. The Burlington Police Department had received a sworn affidavit from a physician, Dr. Reginald Kerr of Essex Junction, stating that Eleanor Brennan had shown signs of early cognitive decline as of October 2024, and that any document she signed during that period was presumed valid until proven otherwise in probate court. The probate court had a 14-month docket. Frances Bell looked across her desk at Eleanor and told her, in a voice flat with apology, that the law was going to take 1.5 years to give her back a house she would no longer have a key to by Sunday. On Sunday, The 2nd of November, at 3:47 in the afternoon, Marcus Vance came to the front door of 412 Maple Avenue with 2 black trash bags in his left hand and a folded piece of paper in his right. He did not come inside. He stood on the porch. He set the trash bags down at Eleanor's feet. He read the paper aloud, though Eleanor could see it was the same notice to vacate she had already read on Thursday morning. He said one sentence that was not on the paper. He said, "You've been a burden this family has carried long enough." Eleanor did not answer him. She walked to the hallway cabinet. She removed her wool coat. She removed her mother's reading glasses from the side table. She walked back to the porch. She picked up the 2 trash bags. She walked past Marcus without looking at him. She forgot Thomas's wedding ring. She forgot her father's photographs. She forgot the manila folder marked property. She forgot the silver porter's whistle in the top drawer beside the rolling pin. She remembered the $8 in her purse because she had counted them at the grocery store on Saturday. The deadbolt turned behind her. The porch light clicked off. Marcus's Lexus pulled out of the driveway at 411 and did not return. Eleanor walked 6 blocks to the Pearl Street bus shelter and sat down on the wooden bench. She folded the $8 into her left sock so the boys passing through after midnight would not see them. She slept sitting up with her back against the corrugated metal wall and the 2 trash bags between her ankles. The temperature that night was 36 degrees. She slept in the same shelter on Monday, on Tuesday, on Wednesday, on Thursday, on Friday, on Saturday, on Sunday, on Monday, on Tuesday. 9 nights. On the morning of the 10th day, the 12th of November, a Wednesday, a county worker came through the shelter at 6 in the morning with a stack of flyers and a roll of masking tape. He taped a flyer to the inside wall of the shelter and moved on without speaking to her. Eleanor read the flyer because there was nothing else to read. The flyer advertised an estate auction. The header read, "Millfield Junction Rail Yard, final liquidation sale, Saturday only." There were photographs of 3 Steam Era passenger cars. There was a list of lot numbers. At the bottom of the flyer, in smaller type, there was a single line, Lot 47, locked rail car, contents unknown, no key on file. Inspection ticket $8. Eleanor read the line twice. Then she read the header again. Millfield Junction. The words sat inside her chest the way a stone sits inside still water. She had not heard the name of that rail yard since the autumn of 1974. She had heard it then from her father on the front step of their house in Essex Junction on the 8th of October at 5:30 in the morning. He had been wearing his Pullman porter's coat. He had been holding his work bag. He had bent down to her. She was 9 years old, and he had put his hand on the top of her head, and he had said one sentence she had spent 51 years deciding was the confusion of a tired man on a long shift. He had said, "If anything happens, kid, Millfield Junction." Remember, he had died of a heart attack on the train at 3:20 in the afternoon the following day. Eleanor stood up from the wooden bench at the Pearl Street bus shelter. She walked out into the November rain. She did not have an umbrella. She walked east through downtown Burlington, past the closed bakery on Church Street, past the diner where she had eaten breakfast with Thomas for 41 years, past the elementary school where she had taught long division to David Petrosian in 1979. She walked out onto Route 2 and then onto the old Vermont 117, and she kept walking. The distance from the Pearl Street bus shelter to the Millfield Junction rail yard was 11 4/10 of a mile. It took her 4 hours and 20 minutes. The wool coat soaked through at the shoulders within the first 30 minutes. She walked anyway. She arrived at the auction at 3:51 in the afternoon. 8 minutes before the inspection window closed. The auctioneer was a man named Roy Tibbetts, a 68-year-old Vermonter in a wax jacket. He looked at her wet coat and her trash bags and her 8 wet dollars, and he did not ask any questions. He took the $8. He handed her a numbered cardboard ticket and a flashlight on a piece of string. He said, "Car's been locked since '74. No key. You can look through the window. Nobody's bid on it in 3 auctions. Last lot of the day." Eleanor walked across the gravel to the far end of the rail yard. Lot 47 sat on a siding by itself, separated from the other cars by 60 feet of weeds. It was a 1952 Pullman sleeper car, dark green, under 51 years of dust. The windows opaque with grime, the wheels rusted to the rails. She circled the car once. She wiped a circle in the dust on the second window from the rear with the inside of her wool sleeve. She switched on the flashlight. She pressed her face to the glass. The beam of the flashlight moved slowly across the interior. It crossed a folded gray blanket on the porter's berth. It crossed a brass coat hook. It crossed a small framed photograph she could not make out. It crossed a brass nameplate above the berth. The beam stopped. The nameplate had been polished by hand. The polishing rag was still folded on the shelf beside it, 51 years old, gray with dust, but folded the way her father had folded every cloth in his life, into a perfect square with the seams tucked under. The nameplate read, in 2 engraved lines, "Brennan and daughter." Not Patrick Brennan, not P. Brennan Porter, Brennan and daughter. Eleanor's flashlight lowered to the gravel without her telling it to. Her knees touched the side of the car. The rain fell on the back of her neck. She put her right hand flat against the green steel of the Pullman car, and she leaned her forehead against her own knuckles, and she said one word into the rain. "Daddy." She did not know yet what was inside the car. She knew only this: the car had her name on it. The railway had locked it the day her father died, and for 51 years, no one had bothered to read what was written above the bed where he slept. Eleanor did not leave the rail yard that night. She stayed on her knees against the side of the Pullman car for 11 minutes. Then she stood up. She wiped her hands on the front of her wet coat. She walked back across the gravel to the auctioneer's table, where Roy Tibbetts was packing up a metal cash box and pulling a tarp over his folding chairs. She said, "What does lot 47 cost to buy?" Roy looked up at her. He looked at her again. He set the cash box down on the table. He said, "Ma'am, that car's been on the block at $2,500 for 3 auctions. Nobody wants it. Railroad wants it gone before the snow. I can take $500 tonight and call it sold, but you'd need it in cash, and you'd need to move it within 90 days, and the railway won't store it past March." Eleanor said, "I do not have $500. Roy looked at the trash bags at her feet. He looked at the soaked wool coat. He looked at the $8 inspection ticket still in her left hand. He said, "Where are you sleeping tonight?" Eleanor said, "I have not decided yet." Roy Tibbetts was 68 years old. He had been an auctioneer in Caledonia County for 31 years. He had watched bank repossessions turn 3 families he had grown up with into people who slept in their cars at the rest stop on Route 2. He had a wife named Marlene who had told him twice that month that if he brought home one more stray dog, she was going to leave him. He said, "There's a caboose at the back of lot 47. Belongs to the railway. They've been using it for storage. Nobody's been inside it since June. The padlock has been broken since spring, and they haven't fixed it. If somebody were to sleep in there for a few nights, I wouldn't see them, and the railway wouldn't either." Eleanor said, "Thank you." Roy said, "There's a wood stove in the caboose. The chimney is clear. There's a half a cord of birch under the tarp by the maintenance shed. The kitchen at the diner across the road throws out the soup at 9 o'clock. Wendy, who runs the till there, does not check the back door at 9:15. Eleanor said, "Thank you." Roy said, "The car is yours if you want it. I will hold the lot at $500 for 30 days. I will not put it back on the block. You have my word." He wrote his telephone number on the back of the $8 inspection ticket with a carpenter's pencil. He handed it back to her. He did not shake her hand. He picked up the cash box and walked to his truck and drove away without looking at her again. That was the first ally. The caboose was 41 feet long, painted oxblood red under 50 years of fading, parked on the same siding as Lot 47. The padlock hung open on the hasp. Eleanor pushed the door inward with her shoulder. The interior smelled of cold iron and old creosote and the particular sweet rot of a place that had been closed too long. She found the wood stove. She found a box of long matches in the brakeman's locker. She found the half cord of birch under the tarp where Roy had said it would be. She built the first fire of her new life at 5:40 in the evening on the 12th of November, and she sat on the floor of the caboose with her back against the stove, and she watched the inside of the metal door turn from black to gray to the color of a sunrise. She slept on a folded canvas tarp that night. She slept 11 hours. It was the first 11 hours of sleep she had had since the 2nd of November. She woke at 4:50 in the morning. She walked to the diner across the road. The back door was unlocked. There was a stock pot of beef and barley soup on the cooling rack with a piece of masking tape on the lid that read through. She filled a quart jar she had taken from the brakeman's locker. She walked back to the caboose. She ate the soup with a spoon she rinsed under the rain barrel. Then she walked to Lot 47. The exterior door of the Pullman car was locked with a brass railway lock dated 1952. The lock had no keyhole on the outside. It opened only with a porter's master key, and porter's master keys had not been manufactured since 1971. Eleanor walked the perimeter of the car 3 times. She did not try to force the lock. She had taught arithmetic for 41 years, and arithmetic teaches a person that a problem that resists pressure usually yields to patience. On the 4th lap, she stopped at the rear vestibule. The vestibule had a small brass plate beside the door, screwed flush against the steel, no larger than a deck of cards. The plate was engraved in the same hand as the nameplate inside. It read, "For my daughter, reach behind." Eleanor knelt on the gravel. She slid her right hand into the gap between the vestibule plate and the wheel housing. The gap was 3 inches wide. Her hand went into the wrist. Her fingers found a small metal hook welded to the inside of the steel skirt. On the hook hung a single brass key on a leather thong. The leather thong had been there since the 8th of October, 1974. The key opened the rear vestibule door. The vestibule door opened to a narrow corridor. The corridor opened to a porter's berth. The berth was made up. The blanket was folded with the corners tucked the way her father had folded every cloth in his life. The pillow was square. There was a small framed photograph on the shelf above the bed. The photograph was Eleanor at 9 years old, standing on the front step at Essex Junction, holding a tin lunchbox, wearing a yellow dress her mother had sewn from a simplicity pattern in 1973. Eleanor sat down on the edge of the berth. She held the photograph in both hands. She did not cry. She sat in silence for 40 minutes. Then she stood up. She set the photograph back on the shelf in the exact position it had been in. She began to search the car. She found the floor lockbox on the 3rd day. Under a section of carpet she had to cut away with a butter knife from the brakeman's locker. The lockbox was welded into the floor frame. The lid required a second key. The second key was taped to the underside of the porter's berth, exactly where Patrick Brennan had taped it on the night of the 7th of October, 1974, 23 hours before he kissed his daughter on the top of the head and walked out the door of the house in Essex Junction. Eleanor opened the lockbox at 2:11 in the afternoon on the 15th of November. Inside the lockbox, a manila envelope sealed with wax, a second envelope sealed with a brass clasp, a leather-bound ledger the size of a hymnal, a reel-to-reel audio tape in a tin canister labeled in her father's handwriting, Ag Montpellier, if I do not return. She did not open the manila envelope first. She did not open the ledger first. She opened the second envelope, the one with the brass clasp, because it was the smallest, and because her hands were shaking, and because 41 years of arithmetic had taught her to start with the smallest number. The envelope contained a passbook savings account opened on the 3rd of April, 1962, in the name of Eleanor May Brennan at the First Vermont Savings and Loan. The final entry, dated the 7th of October, 1974, read 11,400 cents. Beneath the final entry in her father's handwriting was a note, compound at Brotherhood rate until claimed, P. Brennan, 4471. Eleanor closed the passbook. She placed it on the porter's berth beside the photograph of herself at 9 years old. She did not yet know what 64 years of compound interest at 4.2% had done to $11,400. She did not need to know yet. She knew that her father had opened a bank account for her 3 days before her 6th birthday and had not told her. She opened the manila envelope next. The deed was inside. The deed to the Millfield Junction Station and its surrounding 14 acres of railway land, dated the 12th of June, 1961, was made out to Patrick James Brennan, Pullman Porter, employee number 4471, in recognition of valor rendered the 22nd of February, 1961, at the collapse of the Winooski River Bridge. The deed was notarized. The deed was signed by the president of the Central Vermont Railway. The deed had never been filed at the Caledonia County Courthouse because the railway's attorneys in 1961 had assumed that a Pullman porter with a 9-year-old daughter would never know to file it himself. Eleanor sat on the floor of the Pullman car for 2 hours. Then she stood up. She put the deed inside the inner pocket of her wool coat against her chest. She put the passbook in her right coat pocket. She left the ledger and the reel-to-reel tape inside the lockbox, and she locked the lockbox, and she locked the car behind her. She walked across the gravel to the caboose. She built the fire back up. She ate the second jar of soup from the diner. She slept 10 hours. The next morning, the 16th of November, Eleanor walked 4 miles from the rail yard to the Caledonia County Courthouse in St. Johnsbury. She filed the deed at the recorder's office at 9:43 in the morning. The recorder, a woman named Dolores Pratt, read the deed twice and then read it a third time. She charged Eleanor a $38 filing fee. Eleanor did not have $38. Dolores Pratt waived the fee on the authority of the office and stamped the deed and entered it into the public record at 9:51. The 14 acres and the station building at Millfield Junction were legally and publicly the property of Eleanor May Brennan at 9:51 in the morning on the 16th of November, 2025. The town did not believe her. The news traveled the way news travels in a Vermont town of 904 people, through the diner, through the post office, through the volunteer fire department, through the Methodist church basement on Wednesday night. By the 18th of November, 3 different versions of the story were in circulation. In the first version, Eleanor Brennan was a confused old woman from Burlington who had filed a fraudulent deed and would be arrested by the weekend. In the second version, she was a con artist working with a man from Albany. In the third version, she was the daughter of a Pullman porter who had died 51 years ago, and she was telling the truth, and somebody important was going to be very angry about it. The first person who came to the rail yard was the local newspaper, the Caledonian Record. A reporter named Henry Goss, 26 years old, 6 weeks out of journalism school, walked across the gravel at 3 p.m. on the 19th of November with a notebook and a digital recorder. Eleanor was on a ladder, washing the windows of the Millfield Junction station with a bucket of vinegar water she had carried from the rain barrel. Henry said, "Ma'am, is it true you bought this whole rail yard for $8? Eleanor said, "I did not buy it. My father did in 1961. I am cleaning the windows." Henry said, "Can I write that down?" Eleanor said, "You can write down whatever is true." Henry Goss published the article on the 21st of November on page 3 of the Caledonian Record under the headline, "Porter's Daughter Files 64-Year-Old Deed, Claims Millfield Junction Rail Yard." The article ran 980 words. It quoted Dolores Pratt at the recorder's office. It quoted Roy Tibbets, the auctioneer. It quoted 3 retired railway workers in St. Johnsbury who remembered Patrick Brennan and the bridge collapse of 1961, and who said, on the record, that what the railway did to his daughter was a shame they had carried for half a century. The article was picked up by the Burlington Free Press on the 23rd. Marcus Vance read the Burlington Free Press on the morning of the 23rd of November at the breakfast counter in his kitchen on Maple Avenue. He read it twice. He set the newspaper down. He picked up his phone. He called his father-in-law, Harlan Whitcomb, at 8:11 in the morning. The phone call lasted 9 minutes. The phone call ended with Harlan Whitcomb saying one sentence in a voice flat as a slate roof, "Handle it before the weekend." Marcus Vance drove to the office of Trent Holloway, the attorney whose firm had drafted the original forged power of attorney, at 10:30 in the morning. By 2 p.m, Trent Holloway had filed 3 documents. The first document was an emergency petition in Caledonia County Probate Court to have Eleanor May Brennan declared mentally incompetent retroactive to October of 2024, supported by a fresh affidavit from Dr. Reginald Kerr. The second document was a notice of lien on the Millfield Junction property, filed on behalf of a holding company in Albany, claiming the property had been promised in a verbal agreement to said holding company in March of 2025. The third document was a temporary restraining order prohibiting Eleanor May Brennan from removing any item, document, or fixture from any rail car or structure at the Millfield Junction rail yard, pending the outcome of the competency hearing. A Caledonia County Sheriff's deputy served all 3 documents on Eleanor at the rail yard at 4:12 in the afternoon on the 24th of November. The deputy was apologetic. The deputy was 23 years old. The deputy said, "Ma'am, I'm sorry. I just delivered these." Eleanor read the 3 documents standing on the gravel by the side of Lot 47. She read each one twice. She thanked the deputy. She walked back into the caboose. She built the fire up. She sat on the canvas tarp with her back against the stove, and she did not move for 2 hours. Then she stood up. At 7:30 in the morning on the 25th of November, Eleanor Brennan walked into the diner across the road from the rail yard and sat down at the counter. Wendy, who ran the till, 51 years old, divorced twice, mother of 2, set a cup of black coffee in front of her without being asked. Eleanor said, "Wendy, I need to borrow your telephone. I need to make one long-distance call to Montpelier. I will repay you for the minutes when I am able." Wendy said, "Use the phone in the back office. Don't worry about the minutes." Eleanor walked into the back office. She dialed the main number for the Vermont Attorney General's office in Montpelier. She asked by name for the Deputy Attorney General in charge of elder financial exploitation. She was told the deputy was in a meeting. She was told to leave a message. She did not leave a message. She said, "Please write this down word for word and put it on her desk before 11 o'clock this morning. My name is Eleanor May Brennan. I am the daughter of Patrick Brennan, Pullman Porter, employee number 4471, Central Vermont Railway. I have in my possession a reel-to-reel audio recording made by my father on the 7th of October, 1974. The recording names 3 executives of the Central Vermont Railway who skimmed the Railway Brotherhood Pension Fund between 1968 and 1974. 2 of the 3 are deceased. The 3rd is alive. His name is Harlan Whitcomb. I am bringing the tape to your office tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Please tell the deputy I will be in the waiting room with the original." The receptionist read the message back to her. The receptionist's voice changed in the middle of the 3rd sentence. Eleanor walked out of the back office. She paid for the coffee with a quarter she had found in the pocket of the wool coat. Wendy refused the quarter. Eleanor left it on the counter anyway. She did not yet know that the receptionist would walk the message into the Deputy Attorney General's office at 9:51 that morning. She did not yet know that the Deputy Attorney General, a woman named Carla Mendez, had been investigating the cold case of the Railway Brotherhood Pension Fund for 11 years. She did not yet know that Carla Mendez would cancel 2 meetings and a court appearance and would be standing in her office at 9 o'clock the next morning when Eleanor walked in with the reel-to-reel tape in a paper grocery bag. Eleanor walked back across the road to the rail yard. She unlocked the Pullman car. She removed the reel-to-reel tape from the lockbox. She wrapped it in a clean dish towel from the brakeman's locker. She placed it inside a brown paper grocery bag Wendy had given her. She locked the car. She locked the lockbox. She walked into the caboose. She built the fire up. She slept 7 hours. At 5 in the morning, on the 26th of November, Roy Tibbetts pulled up to the rail yard in his pickup truck. He did not say anything. He opened the passenger door. Eleanor climbed in with the paper grocery bag on her lap. Roy drove her the 51 miles to Montpelier. The plan had not yet reversed, but the gravel was already moving under the adversary's feet, and the adversary did not yet know it. Carla Mendez was 49 years old. She had been Deputy Attorney General for Elder Financial Exploitation in the state of Vermont for 8 years. Before that, she had been a prosecutor in Rutland County for 11 years. Before that, she had been a public defender in Bennington for 4. She had a photograph of her mother on her desk, who had died in a nursing home in 2014 after a son-in-law signed away her checking account. Carla Mendez had not become a prosecutor by accident. She was standing at the door of her office at 8:57 in the morning on the 26th of November when Eleanor Brennan walked off the elevator on the 4th floor of the Pavilion building in Montpelier, carrying a brown paper grocery bag. Carla said, "Mrs. Brennan." Eleanor said, "Yes." Carla said, "I have been waiting 11 years for this bag." She brought Eleanor into a conference room. She brought 2 paralegals. She brought a senior investigator from the Vermont State Police Bureau of Criminal Investigation, a man named Detective Sarah Holloway, 41 years old, 12 years on the elder fraud detail. Carla brought a second pot of coffee and 3 legal pads. She closed the door at 9:11, and she did not open it again until 2:47 in the afternoon. Eleanor placed the reel-to-reel tape on the conference table. She placed the leather-bound ledger beside it. She placed a photocopy of the deed and a photocopy of the passbook beside the ledger. She did not place the original deed or the original passbook on the table. She had left them locked inside the Pullman car. 41 years of teaching had given her the habit of never bringing the original of any document into a room she did not own. Carla Mendez looked at the 4 items on the table. She did not touch them. She said, "Mrs. Brennan, before we begin, I need you to understand one thing. If this tape is what your message said it is, the state of Vermont will be in this with you until the end. You will not be carrying this alone again. Do you understand me?" Eleanor said, "I understand you." A technician was brought in from the Vermont Public Radio Archives in Colchester at 11:40 that morning. A man named Gerald Pike, 63 years old, who had restored more than 2,000 reel-to-reel tapes over 31 years and who still owned a working 1969 Ampex deck. He arrived at 12:20 in the afternoon with a hard shell case and a digital recorder. He set up the Ampex in the conference room. He threaded the tape. He pressed play at 12:41. The recording was clean. The recording was 47 minutes and 16 seconds long. Patrick Brennan's voice came through the speakers the way a man's voice comes through a screen door at the end of a long summer day. Clear, calm, low, unhurried. He stated the date. He stated his name. He stated his employee number. He stated in order the 3 names: Harlan Whitcomb, Vice President of Finance; Roland Spear, Comptroller; Edward Penny, Director of Pensions. He stated the amount skimmed from the Brotherhood Pension Fund between 1968 and 1974, $930, $1,400. He stated the bank, the First National Bank of Albany, account 4711982, held under the corporate name Whitcomb Spear Holdings, LLC. He stated the names of the 4 porters who had brought him the evidence: Curtis Wheeler, Joseph Lange, Theodore Ames, and Calvin Roper. All 4 were dead by 1979. He stated that he was sending copies of the supporting ledgers to the Vermont Attorney General by registered mail on the morning of the 8th of October, 1974, immediately after he completed his last northbound run. He never mailed the ledgers. He died on the train at 3:20 in the afternoon on the 8th of October before the train reached the post office in St. Johnsbury. At the 42nd minute of the recording, Patrick Brennan stopped speaking for 4 seconds. Then he said one sentence in a different voice, softer, slower, the voice a man uses when he is no longer speaking to the record. He said, "Eleanor, if you are hearing this, kid, you were never the burden. You were the reason." Carla Mendez did not look at Eleanor when that sentence played. Carla Mendez looked at her legal pad and she wrote 4 words on it and she underlined them twice. Detective Holloway pressed stop at 12:48. The room was silent for 31 seconds. Carla Mendez said, "Detective Holloway, please prepare 3 arrest warrants. Harlan Whitcomb, 84 years old, of Shelburne, Vermont. Marcus Andrew Vance, 43 years old, of Burlington, and Reginald Kerr, MD, of Essex Junction. Racketeering, conspiracy to defraud, elder financial exploitation, forgery, and grand larceny over $100,000. I want the warrants executed simultaneously at 9 o'clock Friday morning. I do not want any of them to have time to make a telephone call." Detective Holloway stood up. She walked out of the room. The door closed behind her. Carla Mendez also picked up the telephone on the conference room wall and made 3 calls of her own. The first call was to the Caledonia County Probate Court. The competency petition filed against Eleanor Brennan was stayed by the Attorney General's office at 1:14 in the afternoon, pending a state-ordered independent evaluation. Dr. Reginald Kerr's affidavit was flagged for review. The second call was to the Caledonia County Recorder's Office. The lien filed by the Albany Holding Company against the Millfield Junction property was investigated for fraudulent filing at 1:22 in the afternoon. By 3 o'clock the same day, the lien was withdrawn under threat of state prosecution for falsified verbal agreement claim. The third call was to the First Vermont Savings and Loan, now part of Northfield Trust. Carla Mendez spoke with the senior vice president of legacy accounts. She gave him the account number from Eleanor's passbook, 1962 MB 4471. She asked him, by name, what the current balance was. The senior vice president put her on hold for 19 minutes. When he returned to the line, his voice was different. He said, Deputy Attorney General, that account is still active. The current balance, as of close of business yesterday, is $847,291.16. We have been compounding it at the Brotherhood rate since 1962. We never closed it because the trustee, Mr. Brennan, never sent the closure authorization. The account has been waiting for 63 years. Carla Mendez wrote the number down on her legal pad. She slid the legal pad across the conference table to Eleanor. Eleanor read the number. She read it twice. She did not say anything. She picked up her pen. Carla had given her a state-issued pen, and she wrote one sentence on the bottom of the legal pad and slid it back. She had written, "Please use whatever is needed to find the 43 children in my father's ledger. I will sign for it now." Carla Mendez read the sentence. Carla Mendez folded the legal pad in half. Carla Mendez did not say anything for 40 seconds. Then she said, "Mrs. Brennan, we will find them. The state will help you find them. You do not need to spend $1 of that money." "The state has investigators for that." Eleanor said, "I would prefer to pay. Please." Carla Mendez said, "Then we will do it together." Eleanor returned to Millfield Junction that night with Roy Tibbetts at the wheel of the pickup. She returned in a different coat. Carla Mendez's paralegal, a woman named Inez Cordero, had walked her across the street to a department store on the way out of the building and had purchased on a state expense account one navy blue wool coat, one pair of leather gloves, one pair of waterproof boots, and one set of warm undergarments. Inez had also booked Eleanor a room at the Wayside Inn in St. Johnsbury for the next 90 days, paid in advance from a victim assistance fund Eleanor had not known existed. Eleanor did not stay at the Wayside Inn that night. She thanked Inez. She put the receipt in her pocket. She went back to the caboose at the rail yard. She built the fire up. She slept on the canvas tarp with the new coat folded under her head. She had decided, on the drive back from Montpelier, that she would not sleep inside a building she did not own until the Pullman car was officially hers and the deed to the station was no longer being contested by any human being on the face of the earth. The town turned on the morning of the 27th of November. The Burlington Free Press ran a follow-up story on the front page, above the fold under the headline, 51 years after Porter's death, daughter uncovers pension fraud. Ag opens investigation into prominent Shelburne family. The article named Harlan Whitcomb. The article named the dollar amount. The article quoted Carla Mendez on the record. "This is the largest case of elder financial exploitation in Vermont history, and it began with a Pullman porter who knew in 1974 that someone was going to listen eventually. His daughter is the someone." At 7:30 that morning, the diner across the road from the rail yard was full. Wendy at the counter did not charge Eleanor for her coffee. A retired railway brakeman named Earl Tibbetts, Roy's older brother, 74 years old, stood up from his booth and walked to where Eleanor was sitting and put a $50 bill on the counter beside her cup and walked out without saying a word. By noon, 11 men and 4 women had come to the rail yard with tools. They had come without being asked. They had come because Earl Tibbetts had walked from the diner to the volunteer fire department, and from the volunteer fire department to the Methodist church, and from the Methodist church to the lumber yard, and he had said in each place the same sentence: Patrick Brennan's daughter is at the rail yard. Bring what you have. A retired carpenter named Wallace Pringle, 69 years old, brought a circular saw and 3 boxes of galvanized nails. A mother of 3 named Anya Petrosian brought 4 gallons of paint and a stepladder. Did not yet know that Anya was the daughter-in-law of David Petrosian, the boy she had taught long division to in 1979. She would not learn this until Christmas. A welder named Bo Ferraro brought a portable arc welder and a generator. 2 teenage boys from the high school, sent by their grandfather, brought rakes and a wheelbarrow. They began with the station building. They did not ask Eleanor what she wanted. Wallace Pringle climbed onto the roof at 1 in the afternoon and started replacing rotted cedar shingles. Anya Petrosian began washing the inside of the station windows. Bo Ferraro lit the arc welder and began cutting away the rusted iron bars that had been bolted across the station doors since 1974. Eleanor stood on the gravel in her new navy coat and watched. She did not cry. She walked over to Wallace Pringle's truck and unloaded the boxes of nails herself and stacked them inside the station door. The work went on for 11 weeks. The arrests came on the morning of the 28th of November. Detective Holloway and 3 Vermont State Police vehicles executed all 3 warrants at 9 o'clock simultaneously. Harlan Whitcomb was taken from the breakfast room of his 8-bedroom house in Shelburne in slippers and a bathrobe. Dr. Reginald Kerr was taken from his medical office in Essex Junction in front of 2 patients. Marcus Andrew Vance was taken from the front porch of the house at 412 Maple Avenue in Burlington at 9:03 in the morning, in handcuffs, in front of a neighbor who was walking her dog. The neighbor took a photograph with her phone. The photograph appeared on the front page of the Burlington Free Press the next morning under the headline, "Vance arrested on the porch of Aunt's stolen house." The wife of Marcus Vance, Lindsay Whitcomb Vance, filed for divorce the following Tuesday. She also filed a sworn affidavit with the Attorney General's office stating that she had overheard her husband and her father discussing the Millfield Junction property in October of 2024, and that her father had said in her presence that the old woman never has to know what her father left her. She has never asked in 51 years. By the middle of January, the station roof was finished, the windows were glazed, the platform was rebuilt with new oak planking, and the Pullman car, the Green Mountain, was sitting in a heated work tent that Bo Ferraro had welded together from scrap rail cars, undergoing the slow, careful restoration that Patrick Brennan had been saving for the day his daughter was old enough to ride in it. The town had turned. The state had turned. The press had turned. The arrests had been made. The adversary still had one card left. Harlan Whitcomb, out on $300,000 in bail, his passport surrendered, his bank accounts under court order, had hired a defense attorney from Boston named Pelham Cruz, a man who had defended 4 federal racketeering cases and lost only 1. Pelham Cruz filed a motion in late January to suppress the reel-to-reel recording on the grounds that the chain of custody had been broken for 51 years and the tape was inadmissible as evidence under the Vermont Rules of Evidence. A hearing on the motion was scheduled for the 14th of February in the Caledonia County Superior Court. Carla Mendez told Eleanor on a Tuesday afternoon in the conference room in Montpelier that the motion had a real chance of succeeding. She said, "Mrs. Brennan, I am not going to lie to you. If the judge grants the suppression motion, we lose the racketeering charge against Whitcomb. We keep the elder financial exploitation charge against your nephew. We keep the forgery. But Whitcomb walks on the pension fund. I want you to know that, because I want you to be prepared." Eleanor said, "Will it still go to trial?" Carla Mendez said, "It will still go to trial, but the centerpiece will be gone." Eleanor said, "And the 43 children in my father's ledger." Carla Mendez said, "We have located 31 of them so far. Detective Holloway is working on the rest." Eleanor said, "Thank you." She walked out of the conference room. She rode back to Millfield Junction with Roy Tibbetts. She did not tell anyone in the town what Carla had said. That night, in the caboose, she opened her father's leather-bound ledger for the 11th time since she had found it. She read the 43 names. She read the last known addresses. She read, at the bottom of the last page, a single line in her father's handwriting that she had read 10 times before and had not understood. "Calvin Roper has the second copy. Box 4, in the brakeman's room. He swore on his children." Eleanor closed the ledger. Calvin Roper had been dead for 46 years. He had been buried in a porter's grave at the Glenwood Cemetery in St. Johnsbury, 3 plots down from her father. He had died in 1979 of pneumonia, leaving behind a widow named Olive and 3 sons. She had been to his grave once with her mother in the spring of 1980. She had never set foot in the brakeman's room. She had not known there was a brakeman's room. She put on the new wool coat. She walked out of the caboose at 10:40 at night into snow that had been falling since 6. She walked down the line of cars on the far siding, past the work tent, past the station, to the small wooden structure she had assumed was a tool shed. The door read, in faded white lettering, "Brakeman CVR." The padlock was broken. She pushed the door open. The brakeman's room was 11 feet by 14 feet. It smelled of coal dust and old paper. 4 wooden crates were stacked along the back wall, stenciled in white paint. Box 1, Box 2, Box 3, Box 4. Box 4 was on the bottom. Eleanor moved the other 3 crates aside. She knelt on the plank floor. She lifted the lid of Box 4 with both hands. Inside Box 4 was a second reel-to-reel tape in a tin canister, identical to the first, labeled in Calvin Roper's handwriting, "Duplicate, P. Brennan, 8 Oct 1974. Chain of custody, C. Roper, T. Ames, J. Lang, C. Wheeler." Signed. Beneath the tape were 4 sworn affidavits, each on Railway Brotherhood letterhead, each notarized by a notary public in Caledonia County on the 9th of October 1974, the day after Patrick Brennan died. Each affidavit was signed by one of the 4 porters. Each affidavit attested that the porter had personally witnessed the original recording made by Patrick Brennan on the 7th of October 1974, had personally received and held a sealed duplicate, and would surrender that duplicate to the Vermont Attorney General if anything happened to the original. The 4 porters had set up a chain of custody 51 years ago. They had simply died before they could deliver it. Eleanor carried the crate, the tape, and the 4 affidavits across the snow to the caboose. She placed them on the canvas tarp. She built the fire up. She did not sleep that night. She sat with her back against the stove, and she watched the inside of the metal door turn from black to gray to the color of a sunrise. At 7 in the morning, she walked to the diner. Wendy let her use the office phone. She called Carla Mendez at home. She said, "Carla, The chain of custody is not broken. The Brotherhood signed for it on the 9th of October, 1974. I have the affidavits. I have a second tape. Calvin Roper held it for me for 46 years. I would like to bring them to you this afternoon. Carla Mendez did not speak for 16 seconds. Then she said, Mrs. Brennan, please do not move from where you are standing. I am sending a state vehicle. The tape and the affidavits will travel under police escort. I will meet you at the office at 1 o'clock. The suppression motion was heard on the 14th of February in Courtroom 2 of the Caledonia County Superior Court at 9 in the morning. Pelham Cruz argued for 41 minutes. He argued elegantly. He cited 11 precedents. He argued that 51 years of unsupervised storage in a locked train car constituted an unbroken break in chain of custody, and that the original recording was inadmissible as a matter of law. Carla Mendez stood up at the prosecution table. She did not argue for 41 minutes. She argued for 9. She walked to the evidence table. She placed 4 notarized affidavits on the table, dated the 9th of October, 1974. She placed the second reel to reel tape beside them, sealed in its original canister with Calvin Roper's signature across the seal in red wax. She placed a written report from Gerald Pike, the audio technician, confirming that the second tape was an unbroken duplicate of the first, recorded on a separate machine within 36 hours of the original. She said, Your Honor, the chain of custody was never broken. It was witnessed by 4 men, signed under oath, notarized within 24 hours of the recording, and held in continuous physical possession by the Railway Brotherhood until the legal heir of Patrick Brennan recovered it 8 days ago. The defense asks the court to suppress a recording because the 4 men who witnessed it had the misfortune of dying before the daughter of the recorder was old enough to be told where to look. The state of Vermont will not accept that argument. Neither, I trust, will the court. The judge was a woman named Margaret Ainsley, 61 years old, 22 years on the bench. She read the affidavits at the bench for 11 minutes. She did not look up. She denied the motion at 10:46 in the morning. She said, in the formal language of the court, the chain of custody is intact. The recording is admissible. We will proceed to trial as scheduled. Pelham Cruz packed his briefcase in silence. Harlan Whitcomb, sitting at the defense table in a dark suit that no longer fit him correctly, did not look at his attorney. He did not look at the judge. He looked across the aisle at Eleanor Brennan, who was sitting in the 3rd row of the gallery in her navy wool coat with her father's silver porter's badge number 4471, pinned to the lapel. He said one word, loud enough for the gallery to hear, before the bailiff approached the defense table. He said, "How?" Eleanor did not answer him in the courtroom. The bailiff stepped between them. The proceedings were adjourned. She answered him in the hallway outside courtroom 2 on a polished marble floor under a row of brass coat hooks installed in 1903. Harlan Whitcomb was waiting for the elevator with Pelham Cruz. He was 84 years old. He was using a cane he had not used the week before. Eleanor walked the length of the hallway alone. Carla Mendez had asked her not to. Eleanor had said, I will not raise my voice. I will not say anything that cannot be repeated in court. Carla had stepped aside. Eleanor stopped 4 feet from Harlan Whitcomb. She did not raise her voice. She said, You asked me how, Mr. Whitcomb. I will tell you how. My father was a Pullman porter. He earned $41 a week. He kept a passbook in my name from the year I was 3 years old. He locked a tape in a train car because the 4 men he trusted were not as wealthy as the 3 men he was reporting. He died believing his brothers would carry it for him. They tried. They died too soon. And for 51 years, my name sat above a bed in a train car at a rail yard you owned a piece of, and you never once thought to read the nameplate. Harlan Whitcomb did not answer. Eleanor said, "You took my house. You took my husband's ring. You took the photographs of my father. You used my own nephew to do it because you taught him I was a burden. You were wrong about one thing, Mr. Whitcomb. I was not the burden. The tape was the burden. You carried it for 51 years, and you did not know it was sitting 6 inches under the floor of a car you walked past every summer." She did not wait for him to answer. She turned. She walked back down the hallway. Pelham Cruz helped Harlan Whitcomb into the elevator. The elevator doors closed at 11:14 in the morning. The trial began on the 3rd of June. It ran for 11 days. Carla Mendez called 90 teen witnesses. The recording was played in open court on the 4th day. The jury heard Patrick Brennan's voice for the first time in public in 51 years. They heard him state the names. They heard him state the amounts. They heard him say, at the 42nd minute, Eleanor, you were never the burden. You were the reason. 3 jurors wiped their eyes. The court reporter set down her stenograph and waited 11 seconds before resuming. The verdict came back on the 18th of June at 3:41 in the afternoon. Harlan Whitcomb, guilty on all 6 counts of racketeering, conspiracy, and elder financial exploitation. Sentenced on the 11th of August to 14 years in the Federal Correctional Facility at Devens, Massachusetts. His personal assets, 3 houses, 4 vehicles, $12,200,000 in investment accounts were frozen pending civil restitution. $8,400,000 were ordered returned to the Railway Brotherhood Pension Fund and distributed to the surviving families of porters who had retired between 1968 and 1974. Reginald Kerr, guilty of forgery of a medical affidavit and conspiracy to commit elder financial exploitation. Sentenced to 4 years, his medical license was revoked permanently by the Vermont Board of Medical Practice on the 22nd of August. Marcus Andrew Vance, guilty of 3 counts of felony elder financial exploitation, 1 count of forgery of a power of attorney, and 1 count of grand larceny over $100,000. Sentenced on the 29th of August to 7 years in the Vermont State Correctional Facility at Springfield. The house at 412 Maple Avenue was ordered returned to Eleanor Brennan in full. The Albany Holding Company forfeited the property and was barred from doing business in Vermont for 10 years. Thomas's wedding ring, the framed photographs of Patrick Brennan, and the manila folder marked property were recovered from a storage unit in Colchester on the 2nd of September. Eleanor sat in the 3rd row of the gallery for the sentencing of Marcus Vance. The judge, Margaret Ainsley, again asked Eleanor if she wished to address the court before sentence was pronounced. It was Eleanor's right as the victim under Vermont law. Eleanor stood up. She walked to the small wooden podium beside the prosecution table. She placed a single folded sheet of paper on the podium. She did not unfold it. She had brought it because Carla had told her she could. She had not written anything on it. She looked at Marcus across the courtroom. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit. He had lost 26 pounds. He did not look up at her. She said, "Your Honor, I raised this man from the age of 4. I taught him long division at the kitchen table at 412 Maple Avenue. I paid his college tuition in cash from a teacher's pension. I am not going to ask for mercy for him. I am also not going to ask for a longer sentence. I am going to ask the court for one thing only. I am asking that when Marcus Vance is released from prison in 7 years, he is not permitted to come within 1 mile of my house, my station, or my train car for the rest of his natural life. I do not wish to see him again. I am not going to forgive him. I am also not going to hate him. I am going to do neither. I am going to do something else. I am going to forget him. Thank you. She folded the paper she had not unfolded. She walked back to her seat in the third row. The judge granted the request as a permanent civil order on the spot. Marcus Vance did not look up. He was taken out of the courtroom at 4:11 in the afternoon. Eleanor did not watch him leave. She walked out of the courthouse at 4:26. Roy Tibbetts was waiting in the pickup truck. The two teenage boys who had brought the wheelbarrow in November were sitting in the bed of the truck with a folded American flag and the silver porter's whistle. They drove her back to Millfield Junction. The station had been finished for 3 months. The Pullman car, the Green Mountain, was on the main track, polished, painted, the brass nameplate above the porter's berth, catching the afternoon light through the south-facing window the way it had not done since 1974. Above the depot, in gold leaf on a black painted sign that Wallace Pringle had hung at 6 in the morning while she was in court, were 5 words and a date: Brennan and daughter, EST. 1952. Reopened 2026. Eleanor stood on the gravel in the navy wool coat. She did not cry. She walked up the new oak steps to the platform, and she put her hand flat against the side of the car the way she had put it there on the 12th of November, and she said one word that was not for the gallery, and not for the press, and not for the court. She said, "Daddy." The Pullman car, the Green Mountain, was hers. The station was hers. The 14 acres were hers. The tape had been admitted. The verdict had been read. The vindication was complete. The Brennan Heritage Rail Museum and Working Depot opened to the public on the 12th of November, 2026, 1 year to the day after Eleanor pressed her face against the dust-caked window of the Green Mountain and read 2 words by the beam of an $8 flashlight. The opening was held at 3:51 in the afternoon, the same minute, on the same day, of the year before. Eleanor had asked Wallace Pringle to set the time. He had not asked her why. 43 former foster children stood on the platform. Detective Holloway and Carla Mendez and Inez Cordero had spent 11 months finding them, through county welfare records, through Brotherhood archives, through 3 nuns at a closed convent in Springfield who had kept their own ledger from 1968 onward. The youngest was now 56 years old. The oldest was 78. One was a retired postmaster from Rutland. One was a piano tuner from Quebec who had crossed the border at 4 in the morning. One was a woman who had become a federal judge in Massachusetts and who arrived in a borrowed Subaru with her husband and a coffee cake. David Petrosian was there, with his daughter-in-law Anya, who had washed the station windows in November. He had come from Boston. He was 61 years old. He had brought a fruitcake. Eleanor wore the navy blue conductor's coat. The brass buttons had been polished by Wallace Pringle the night before. Pinned to the lapel was her father's silver porter's badge, number 4471. In her right hand was her father's brass conductor's whistle, recovered from the locked car on the 3rd day. She raised the whistle. She blew it once. The 1952 Pullman sleeper car, the Green Mountain, released its air brakes with a hiss. The 43 stepped from the platform onto her train. The retired postmaster helped the piano tuner with his case. The federal judge from Massachusetts sat down beside the woman who had been the youngest baby in Patrick Brennan's ledger in 1974 and put her hand on the woman's hand and did not let go until the train pulled out. The train ran 6 miles up the old Central Vermont line and 6 miles back. It was the first passenger run on that section of track since 1974. Roy Tibbetts' older brother, Earl, had been licensed by the state as the conductor. He wore his old Brotherhood pin on his collar. He had not worn it since 1979. The house at 412 Maple Avenue belonged to Eleanor again. She did not move back into it. She walked through it once, in March, with a real estate agent from Burlington. She collected 3 items: Thomas's wedding ring from the small white dish beside the kitchen sink, the framed photographs of Patrick Brennan from the hallway, and the silver porter's whistle from the top drawer beside the rolling pin. She had thought on the gravel at the rail yard in November that she had forgotten the whistle. She had not forgotten it. She had simply left it where it belonged until she had a place to bring it. She sold the house in April for $212,000 to a young couple expecting their first child. She used the money to endow a scholarship at Edmonds Elementary School in Burlington, the Patrick and Eleanor Brennan Memorial Fund for the children of working parents. The scholarship paid for school supplies, winter coats, and 1 warm meal a day for any child in the 4th grade whose family asked, with no questions and no paperwork. David Petrosian's grandson was the first scholarship recipient. Eleanor lived in the small apartment above the Millfield Junction station. There were 2 rooms. There was a kitchen with a gas stove. The back left burner lit on the first try, every time. Wallace Pringle had personally rebuilt it. She rose at 5:45. She put the kettle on. She set out 2 cups on a tray she had brought from Maple Avenue. 1 cup for her, 1 cup for Thomas. The cup for Thomas was white with a small chip on the handle where he had dropped it on the morning of their 40th anniversary. She set it on the right side of the saucer.